Today on the Videomaker podcast, Chris and I talk all about how much to charge for video production. And, you know, this is kind of a trick question because underlying that is the implied question, how much does it cost to make a video? Which is, you know, really, really difficult to answer. It's going to be different for every video that you make. But we talk about all the different expenses that go into making video and all the things that, you know, might not think about. So we talk a lot about accounting related stuff. I'm sorry to say for anyone who loves gear, we do talk about gear a little bit at the front, but we really are talking about how to price out a video production business today. And it's very detailed. So if you're at all interested in starting a business or even just doing some paid video work on the side, this is worth listening to. As always, if you've been listening to the podcast and you enjoy it, we'd love it if you went to Spotify or Apple Podcasts and hit the subscribe button or the heart button or whatever it happens to be in your app. It will deliver the podcast straight to your mobile device every time we release one. So really convenient for you, really helpful for us. Okay, let's get on with the show. Welcome to the Videomaker podcast. I'm Mike Wilhelm, and with me, as always, is Chris Monlux.
Hello.
Okay, Chris, let's see. We do have another audio change this week, don't we?
Yeah, we do. Well, it's not anything different than we've done in the past, but we're now back to both you and I having the same microphone.
Yeah.
So now we're it just visibly looks better. I don't know. I just felt like changing the mic, so I did.
You know, I feel like we need to formalize this segment of the show where we talk about, our audio changes. Actually, audio, video, sometimes the cameras change, I guess.
And they did today too.
Oh, what's different now?
Well, so we were shooting with the R5 and the R3 Canons. Now we're shooting with the C200 and the R3.
And we were just talking earlier about how the lighting is a little bit different too.
Yeah, every time I do some B-roll in this room, the lights all end up changing a little bit. So yeah. It's I try to perfect it a little bit every time. It gives me a chance to try something else, but it does make consistency an issue.
Yeah. So I'm going to throw you a curveball, Chris. We didn't discuss this beforehand. We're going to talk today about how to, decide how much to charge for video production services. But considering as soon as we get into this, that's basically the end of gear talk.
Yeah.
What we just discussed. Gear has been top of mind for you for the last couple of weeks because you're reviewing a couple of cameras, the R3 and the Z9, which are the flagship photo cameras. Any teasers you can give us? Any what's the big takeaway for each one?
Big thing for the R3 is that when you're shooting in 6K RAW, there's no noise. So you could just shoot at any ISO and it's fine. I mean, it goes up to 25,600. And then when you're shooting in RAW, you have to shoot in log. So it starts at ISO 800, but really fabulous. Never had that experience, but there isn't, 5 or 6 stops in that range. Yeah. So it's not like there's a huge range. Like you're going into the stratosphere into hundreds of thousand ISO.
Right.
But still pretty impressive, was into that, and a pretty decent dynamic range as well. The Z9, I actually ended up really liking. I did I shot the whole review with me on the Z9, and on the R3 review, I did it with the R3, and I like the A-roll shot with the Z9 better, even though overall I didn't like it as much as the R3. So, it's always that struggle. It's like, oh man, I like this camera. I like the features. I like how it works. And then you just like the way the other one looks. Yeah. And you're like, oh man, I'm really hurting here. Which one do I choose? So that's, we're going to be doing a heads up with them, which I haven't even quite, jumped into comparing the two other than, high level specs wise. But the dual pixel autofocus on the R3, and this is now their second version of it, a dual auto pixel 2 or something like that. It's real impressive, and it's pretty hard to compare with that. I got the Z9 to work pretty well, but it didn't work quite as well, and it was definitely not as intuitive to just getting and working well. But I think that's also because Nikon isn't a leader in video, right? They don't really have a video only line like Canon has, or Sony for that matter.
So not as intuitive for a video shooter as a result.
Yeah, well, and autofocuses in general don't typically you don't get all of the really awesome, the R3 has pupil detect, so it'll look where you're wanting to focus and focus it for you.
Oh, wow.
Awesome. I heard some great things about it. I didn't even try it out because I'm not using this as a photo camera. And it doesn't work in video. So it's like, oh, that's a great feature, not valuable to a video shooter.
Yeah.
But it'd be, I don't know if I'd like that or not. I guess it really comes into your muscle memory if it's better. And, if you're shooting something where you don't want to communicate anything more than just your eye going to the thing, that'll be great. But I think it'd be a little jarring for video anyway.
That definitely seems like something that'll probably hit the consumer video cameras before the pro video cameras. When you getting to the point where the autofocus is so good, you don't even have to think about it anymore.
Yeah.
That's definitely a consumer thing, right?
Yeah, for sure. Well, and it's funny because it's like, those features are really wanted, but it ends up being a high-end cost to do something like that. But we'll see it in small sensor and on, well, it's a whole lot easier to do with small sensors in general anyway.
Yeah. Okay. Gear talk complete.
Yeah.
Sorry for anyone who is here to listen to the gear talk, but we're going to talk about spreadsheets now.
Yeah. No, there's not specific. The thing is I was on Reddit, and that's kind of what came up, this idea, but I've had this conversation quite a few times with producers from when I was hiring people at the station to hear, Videomaker audience members and whatnot. It's a tricky thing to figure out and price out your work, and that there are so many different things to consider, including if you're doing it for a living, what kind of work it is, and even the client for that matter. So it's a lot to try to contain and try to understand. But just like anything, you want to eat an elephant, you take one bite at a time. So first things first, you've never charged anyone for video production. Where do you start there, Mike? What do you think?
I feel like if I were to give this advice to a young person who's coming in here, I think it really is the same advice, even no matter how good you are. Is this true? Probably. Just do it for whatever it costs you. That's it. I mean, how you calculate what it costs you is another deal, right? Like in some cases, it's only your time. I've had friends who have wanted to start photography businesses, or maybe they didn't want to start a photography business, but they kind of like photography. And someone said, hey, if you shoot my wedding, I'll buy you the camera that you shoot with.
Yeah.
I would take that all day long as a very beginner, especially for video. If someone made the offer of, I'll buy you the video camera that you shoot my wedding with, I would give that advice to young people for sure, because the only cost is the time. Now, if they say, yeah, the wedding is, in Kathmandu, see you there. Different story, obviously, right?
Lots of things to consider there. And I mean, let's face it, with the cost of cameras, that might be a really rich payment if you got paid in the camera. Although I've definitely heard, I've had friends that do that. No, I'll buy the camera for you if we just need someone to do it.
Yeah.
And that's, worth paid admission. That's great. Now, I think the next step of that would be you're not in need, right? So you can't really do some kind of trade barter. So there has to be some kind of evaluation of value. I think that what you gotta know your market, right? So what you're going to charge for one thing in Nebraska is going to be different than Hollywood for the same type of work. So you got to know what are the competition, what are the expectations, all those kinds of things. But it's if you want to do the work, price yourself into the work. If you don't want to do the work, I wouldn't go with the price yourself out of it, because I've been surprised a few times and they're like, okay, yeah, we'll pay that. And I'm like, damn it, I didn't want to do this, but now it's good money. Oh man.
Yeah.
And so that can be kind of double-edged sword. But I'd say the things that you get started out doing are little pet projects. They're going to be, I don't know how many different like obituary slideshows that I've seen, when people are getting started out, or that, same idea, but like for a birthday or a graduation or, some kind of preparation of moving slides really, and then that might not mean you have to edit or you have to shoot or anything, right? So you have to understand what you are getting hired for. If you're getting hired to edit something or shoot and edit it, don't charge more than the people that do it for a living. If you're not doing it for a living, you don't need to do that.
I think, there is always the, going back to my original advice which was charge what it costs you. That's still true. And maybe if if you want to kind of take the next step other than just like, I just need a camera, so you're going to pay the rental fee for the camera, and that's about it. You really should consider everything it costs you, even the things that you don't think about, the fact that it costs you something. So an example of this is, how much do you pay for the room that you're going to sit in when you edit the video, right? It might be your bedroom, so in that case, does it really cost you anything? Well, yeah, kind of, because, this is a multi-purpose room,
Totally.
right? We have a really great rate calculator for this kind of stuff, videomaker.com/rates.
That's rates with an S.
Yes, rates. And it will basically give you the cost if you're like turning this into your business, right? Like, how many days off a year do you want to take, right? And, it asks you things like, what's your office rent? How much are you paying to rent your studio or whatever? If you are new to this and you want to charge something and consider all those things, well, you have a studio, you have an edit bay, it's your room, but you can do the math to slice that up, right? Just because it's your bedroom doesn't mean that you shouldn't include that, and doesn't mean you can't include it if you want to be competitive, right? Like you said, you're comparing yourselves to the market in general. Well, the people who have been doing this for a long time are including the little tiny slice of how much it costs to use their edit bay for a day, right? To edit the video, or 2 days or a week or whatever it is. So you can do the same thing. And yours is probably a lot cheaper if it's your bedroom, but it's something.
Yeah. Well, and I think a lot of people, when they get into this industry in general, you start out with some gear, right? Like there's something that started for you. Maybe you have a camera, whatever it is that you're using. Just because you already had it before the project doesn't mean that it doesn't have value towards the project, right? Just because you paid it off doesn't mean that you shouldn't be charging for its use. Now, am I saying, charge through the nine? No. We could be talking pennies per thing. The volume of what you charge per thing isn't really as important as just making sure you find the real value of them. So that might be, here's a question that I saw on Reddit, which was, Mike, how do you price out your gear? Do you include it in the project price? Like, so are you going to go down and give an invoice to somebody that says 8 hours using Edit Bay, this much money, or are you going to just give them a big number at the, just give them the final number? Well, I think that probably depends on the client, right? If you're working for someone that needs to know those itemized things, well, it's going to be very helpful to supply those things because it's going to justify whatever the budget is. But otherwise, maybe it's just something, and I wouldn't say, this is the way to I always think of the people don't like to be nickeled and dimed. They don't want to feel like you're just adding a fee on top of a fee on top of a thing. Right. So it's like, this is what it takes to get it done, bare minimum. It's not like I can take anything away from this to make it a cheaper production. Know that, know if someone wants to hire you to make a 30-second commercial, this is easy for me because I've made probably thousands and I've charged for them. And the interesting thing about that is we charged what I considered a loss. And it really was most of the time. We were charging $300 for a commercial that we'd spend 16 hours on shooting and editing and doing that. And that's not really that much money. And it didn't really cover all of the costs. So how could we have made money? Well, it's all of the other business that goes along with that. It's you wanted me to make one commercial. I paid you $300, but you want 5 variations of that. Cool. It's $100 a piece. Well, cool. Then you made money on the extra stuff, the stuff that's more on it. And so then, it's kind of a give and take. Maybe that first little thing wasn't really a big gain for you, but it paid what it cost us. And then we made profit on the things that followed that relationship really. But when you think about like a wedding, let's hope you're not shooting the same person's wedding multiple times, or if you are, it's many years apart. But so how do you deal with that? And I think it's still one of those things where itemize what they want you to do, because those expectations of what they want you to do is what they're paying you for. That's what they're going to tell you if you don't get what they're wanting you to do. They're going to go, but I wanted you to shoot the little kids and you didn't. What am I paying you for? Those are the types of thoughts that people that don't do video production think about. And it's like, well, all of the other hours I was here shooting, but that's not really what they're meaning, right? They're just not understanding. So it's really important to make sure that you're charging for expectations as well. So if you can get them to be clear about what they want, then you also can say, well, this is the value for this. And then when they ask for something outside of that, well, that's outside of the normal purview. I'd love to talk about that with you, but you know, in those kind of money conversations are difficult if you treat them that way. If you just treat them as normal business, no one really bats an eye, and you just go, well, no, actually, that's not in the normal thing. It'd be about $300 more or something. And they might go, oh, well, it's not worth that then. And that's good because you just got them to value what they were asking for. And it wasn't actually something they wanted after you gave them that value.
Yeah, I mean, the unfortunate answer to how much did I charge for this video is it's actually really hard to find that number. And the easy way to say it is total up your costs and add, you know, some percent for your profit or whatever. But the difficult answer is, well, you got to build a budget out of this whole thing, right? This is what Excel is for. You know, all of these things go on there. And, you know, just like you go to hire an attorney and they say, okay, well, yeah, sure, I'll work for you and it's $300 an hour. They're not going to give you an invoice at the end of their work for you saying, here's how much per hour it was for the paralegal, and this is how much it cost for the software that I used to type up this thing, and here's how much it was for the books that I read. They just take all of this stuff and they kind of squish it down into an hourly rate, and as much they count the hours that they work for you, and then they charge you that. Totally. But behind the scenes, they've done all the math on how much am I paying for books, and how much am I paying for rent, and how much does the paralegal cost, and how much does the computer cost, and how frequently do I need to update the software on the computer. That's literally, it's like every single thing that you spend money on, or that someone spends money on when they're doing business.
Yep.
Is documented, and it all goes into that calculation.
Yeah, and I find the helpful thing to go outside of the work that's being done or who's hiring you is, what do you need per day for work? You know, if you're talking about what your hour, you know, this is even if you're just taking any job, doesn't matter even what you're doing, is how much money do you need per hour or per day or whatever slice you're doing it to live my life the way I want to. We have on the calculator, that kind of thing, like how much money do you want to make personally for it? But it's an easy place to go from because likely you know what your target is, and then you can go from there, right? So if you go, well, my day rate is, if you want to use me for 8 hours doing something, I want to get paid $500 for that. Okay, well, there's your basis of your project. You could just as well go, okay, well, $500 is, so what else outside of that $500 would they be having to pay for? Oh, okay, well, I have X, Y, and Z piece of gear. I have to drive my vehicle there. I have the insurance on my car and the business insurance so that if I, you know, trip and fall, I'm not going to be out of business from the broken leg or the broken camera and all those kinds of things. Now, it's really hard to think about all those things if you're doing this on a ad hoc basis and not on a daily life basis. It's going to be a lot harder to price out because a lot of these aren't hard stops. You know, you're not going to go, well, I have to have this, otherwise I don't get to eat. You probably have something else, so it's either additional or not. And that's where I struggle sometimes in pricing things. And so I just end up going to the finished product because I end up being the full person for the project. I'm shooting, writing, editing, doing all that stuff. And so I know, you know, what it's going to take to get that done. And so you have to, you know, price that out and figure it out to what specifically you need. And I don't know how many times I've new producers, it's like, oh, I'm going to charge $100 an hour for editing. Well, you better not make the person that's hiring you know that much if you're just starting out. If they don't know the value of a good editor, you know, they're going to be, I'm paying you how much? I pay my surgeon less than that, you know, whatever it is. Someone's going to, you know, they're going to give you some kind of weird non-response because people don't really get what it takes to get in there. And half the time I've had times people gawk at well, come sit in with our edit and see what it takes to get, and they don't last an hour before they want to leave. So they realize, well, I'd rather pay someone to do this than be a part of it. If you're doing work for laymen, if you're doing stuff in the industry, then I think most everybody knows, you know, what's fair. I mean, like you shouldn't have someone trying to pay you very little if you're working with somebody that you have a relationship with doing production. It's not gonna, I mean, if they want to pay you cheap at the beginning, it's never going to get better. So, you know, it's just one of those things where you got to make sure you have trust in the person that's pricing you out. And like I said before, sometimes the volume of work makes up for the loss in the individual thing. So if you're, going to work for someone that's going to pay you 9 to 5, 40 hours a week, well, surely your hourly rate is not going to be what you're charging to do productions one-off, because you don't have, if you're only doing 1 or 2 projects a month and they take you a week and a half, you have downtime that you're having to pay yourself for not having work. Mm-hmm. And especially freelance work, that's what it's all about, is like, how much can I build up my savings so that the times between projects aren't as hard?
Yeah. And that one is especially tricky because, you want to make enough money to be able to sustain you during those, dry periods.
Yeah.
At the same time, you have to really consider, this is the difficult part, is the duration of the dry periods just inherent to the local market that you're in, or are you, just not that good at filling your schedule compared to your competition, right?
Yeah.
And if it's the latter, then the rates need to reflect that.
Yeah.
So in that case, you might need to lower your rates a little bit to help fill your schedule or what have you. But if 20% of your year is unbooked and your competition only 10% of their year is unbooked, well, they're going to have an edge on you in their pricing, essentially, right? Because they're going to have more work generally. They don't have to increase the price on their clients to make up for the fact that they won't have any clients in whatever month.
That's true. And here's the thing: we don't also have to be number one, right? You can be whatever place you want to be in that stuff, and maybe you want to. It's your lifestyle that you want to have a week between projects. I don't know, maybe there's something that's just how you like it. My buddy works in documentaries, and he's always having to do background on stuff, and like it'll be a year before he's actually in it and working it. And he started the project 6 months prior, and then he's going to work that project for 6 months and then edit it. Mm-hmm. And so he's having to really price in 2 years worth of work to a project. Mm-hmm. And that's, and he's just considering his own cost. Like it starts seeming like a really big, expensive cost for mm-hmm. things. And so you have to get comfortable with that too, of the scale of which your project's going to exist. If you're talking about 6 months worth of work, you're going to be giving someone a tens of thousands of dollars bill. And that's, you can't be shy to go, I need to get paid for my work. This is how it goes. I think one of the biggest things that for any work is, how do you do anything? Well, you show up first, right? So show up to the job, do it again, learn from it. So, just because you might have priced something this time doesn't mean you have to eat it forever. And also that hopefully you're taking away things from each project you do that you're able to figure out efficiencies, right? So they're like, oh, cool, I can do this for cheaper next time because I realized that 2 of those steps were totally unnecessary, and paying attention to that. But, if you don't always have to be super efficient with all your time if that's what you're trying to plan to do, but make sure you know that and you're being honest with yourself about it. So you're pricing out so that when it comes to times off, you're not struggling, because that can be, a pandemic hit, right? Things that no one even saw coming. When you're doing those things freelance, you just got to make sure you have enough of a foundation to really catch yourself. But we step back again just to general projects, figure out what the general market's charging per minute of produced work. Right. I tend to price things out that way because it more so indicates to me how much work it's going to take to get it done. That I know that I can produce about a minute's worth of work from scratch, with a few days worth of work maybe. But if we're talking about, a 10-minute video, well, it doesn't mean it's going to be 10 times more work, but I know I'm going to gain some stuff through efficiencies, but it's not going to be like just double. So you have to kind of figure out what those efficiencies are. And sometimes it's cheaper to pay someone to help you than it is to not have them help you. Yeah. It's really interesting. If you're like, oh yeah, I was really struggling. I did that shoot for 8 hours. And it's like, yeah, if you had a helper, you'd be there for 3 and you only paid them for 3. So you just have a net gain of 2 hours, even if you're talking about just total man hours. Mm-hmm. So it's that kind of stuff can get you stuck if you are thinking too narrowly. And that's why we're talking about this. If you do the long view, you're going to have a better understanding of what it's going to take to make it worthwhile for you to do. Because I'm not an advocate of taking any money that you're not worth. If they want to pay you less, just don't take it. Or don't let someone pay you less than you're worth. But realize there's long views on this stuff. It's not just individual transactions. So that relationship can be made based on the price, or there's other things to encounter. But, I think a lot of people end up getting stuck in the like, oh, they just didn't pay me well enough. And it's like, no, you didn't price yourself well enough. Don't let it be don't be what is it? Anyway, don't be the winner in the situation, not the loser. Try to make the stuff the positive from it, because that positivity leads to more work. And like, I've been surprised by projects that I did, and I was like, I didn't like that project, but the customer really liked me. And you know what they did? They told someone that they were really influential with, and all of a sudden I'm doing that job that I really thought was awesome, and I'm getting paid the price for the work I didn't think was awesome. And you're like, oh, even better. Now I'm getting paid well for the things I love to do. That's a great place to head, but you have to have a little bit of trust and a little bit of, I guess, peace and, and just, it is what it is. We're going to charge this. I'm going to get paid for it. We're going to move on. And the nice thing is you can rinse and repeat, right? So you can just go ahead and start over and go, okay, I'm going to do this better than last time. And regardless, if you underpriced yourself, you're going to be able to get to that point where you're going to know what it's worth to do. Otherwise, you just won't do it. I mean, that's what bankruptcy is, right?
I think that there are a couple of things that that some newer people get kind of, I don't want to say screwed on, but they feel like they might be getting screwed. One is, if you look at, let's say your neighbor is a video producer, you could look at your neighbor and say, okay, well, neighbor charges X, so I guess I'm going to charge X. You might find yourself in a trap thinking that your work you're doing your work the same way that your neighbor's doing their work. So, for example, if your neighbor is making wedding videos and they bought some graphics packages and they paid $50 for a bunch of well-designed graphics, and you don't know that exists, you're new to video production and you're making your own graphics and you need to do a lower third and it takes you 2 hours to make a lower third. At the end of the project, you're going to go, holy cow, I charge the same amount as my neighbor and I feel like I got screwed. I was working for less than minimum wage. Like, I don't like this business.
Yeah.
So that's just to say that new people can fall in this trap if they just don't have the efficiencies built in that people who have been doing it for a long time have. Like you said, well, it might be cheaper just to pay someone to help you. That's absolutely true. And that kind of lesson is often learned through, the school of hard knocks.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, you should always keep your eye out and try to be a lifelong learner in that sense, to figure out how you can lower your own costs and spend less time doing work.
Yeah. And not judging yourself by what you got paid by necessarily how the project turned out.
Yeah.
Give yourself kudos on the wins. Don't, if you did get paid minimum wage on the last, okay, well then make it your mission not to get paid that low. And that's the cool thing about creative work is like, it's not always creative. And so if you can, help contain your creativity and only put it in where it's needed, it's not going to actually be as complicated as it might seem. Because sometimes really you'll get in there like, oh, I have to do this. I mean, just think if you tried to shoot everything linearly, how much longer your production would go just doing that. If you didn't think, oh, I can shoot this out of sequence.
Yes, exactly.
There's just certain things, or like the lower thirds. Yeah, I mean, I could design all the things that we use that are packages, no problem. But why would I? If I can just go search something, pull it up, it's $10. I would have charged, it would have cost me 5 times that to do it myself.
Yeah.
So it's a savings. I mean, some people think it's like cheating. And I guess if you haven't learned from those things that you bought and tried to get to understanding like why they are important and whatnot, I guess you are losing some learning, I guess, in that. But I mean, is it learning that's really going to be all that beneficial if it still makes more sense to go buy some, pre-made packages of something?
Yeah.
You really can't be making custom things for everything because not everything comes with a custom budget.
Yeah. The other place that I think that newer people can fall into a trap is truly not considering all costs. And when I say all costs, I mean not only the costs that you're incurring now, but that you might incur in the future. So an example of this is if you are a state employee in California, and you need to drive your own car for your job, the state will pay you 56 cents per mile that you drive. Well, if you do the math, say you have a car that gets 25 miles per gallon, you're getting paid $14 per gallon of gas, right? Which here in California, it's like $4.50 for a gallon of gas.
Yeah, I saw $5 too.
Really?
Yeah, on my way home on Chevron. Wow. It was expensive.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Russia.
Yeah.
And anyways, so the reason that they pay $14 per gallon of gas, 56 cents times 25 miles, is because there's lots of hidden costs that you incur along the way. Like your car is very slowly breaking down, right?
Yeah.
Your engine broke a tiny little bit while you were doing this work. And so when you're a video producer, if you are counting up all your costs, only those that you occur in the moment that are very apparent to you, when you're done doing a project, you might count the money and go, wow, this is great. I made this much money for only a few hours of work. You might decide, I'm going to do this all the time, and they make that your rate and work forever. But meanwhile, these sort of hidden costs that don't spring up until later end up springing up.
And they'll start robbing you.
And then you're like, why am I poor?
Yeah, totally.
And it's because you haven't considered really all the expenses. There's a lot of things, a lot of little things that you got to consider that sort of tack up over time. One of those things is like healthcare, right? Like, did you include the cost of your healthcare when you were doing that initial very first project when you're counting up all your costs?
Yeah.
If not, then you can't use that as a basis for, turning this into a regular thing.
Unless you want to just live a life without healthcare, but that sounds stupid.
Yeah. You can save a lot of money, by the way, if you just don't
cut all the corners.
Don't go to the doctor.
Yeah,
you'll save
ride
a
the
lot
bus
of money.
to your job. All that stuff. Well, and the thing is like, this used to be really easy to calculate. When cameras had tapes, there's only so many hours before the playhead would stop working, right? And so every time you're using it, you're rubbing a little sandpaper across this playhead, and eventually there's nothing there and it won't work anymore. And so, those repairs, the upkeep, the degradation of your equipment, degradation of you or whatever. I mean, when they're paying $14 for a gallon, they're paying for the rubber that left your tires. They're, paying for, all of the different aspects of that mile, right? Everything that happened within that. So that's the kind of things like when you have like a equipment fee, that's what's paying that, right? It's not just because I have equipment, I'm charging you, no, that should go into a savings account. It really should. Just like if you owned a home, you should put money into a savings account because sometimes you need a roof, sometimes you need a heating and air conditioning, you need something, and you're not going to be able to live without it. Mm-hmm. And I think think of it, if you don't have a fund that you're funding for your camera and your camera stopped working, no more work until you can buy that camera again. But how do you buy that camera? Well, I got to do work. Well, I can't do work because the camera doesn't work, and you can get in a really bad place because of that. So staying ahead of it is really important. Now, can you take some windfalls and go for it? Sure. But they're going to bite you, and they're going to eventually come due. I mean, the bills don't stop. And so you better be prepared for them because they're not a big deal if you have the money for them. Right?
Yeah. So maybe we could just quickly go through some of the expenses to consider.
Yeah.
And we're not going to help you with the math here. Actually, you can go to videomaker.com/rates if you want to see them all again and punch in your own numbers. And actually, just before this episode, Chris and I were just talking about how maybe we should make a spreadsheet and give that to people so they can actually tweak with it a little bit more. Maybe that'll come down the line. If you're hearing this long in the future, you should go see if we put a spreadsheet up. But at any rate, for now, I'm just going to rocket through some of this stuff.
Yeah.
Rent.
Yeah, totally.
How much you spend on computers, furniture, or other production equipment, cameras, lenses, tripods.
You know what? Storage of media. You got to figure out what project you're doing. Do you need to archive this footage?
Yes.
There's costs like that are going to keep on being a problem down the road. So pay attention to that. I mean, if you did a wedding, how long do you keep the wedding footage for? I don't know. You need to figure that out.
Yep. How much do you spend on your mobile phone, the phone itself, the service, your internet costs?
Yeah. I mean, you could do this job without those two.
Yeah, exactly. How much do you spend on legal fees? Maybe not, but maybe you don't spend hardly any, but some
Well, you should probably get some advice on what your liabilities are if you're starting a business.
Also, you should also maybe talk to an attorney if you're making a kind of a boilerplate contract for your clients to sign.
Yeah, totally.
Accounting fees, totally.
I'm not a spreadsheet guy. I'd much rather have someone that deals with that. Part of that is actually having a PO and sending it to people and knowing the terminology you need, like what's net 30. That means they need to pay me in 30 days.
Yeah.
Those kinds of things, and that it can be painful to deliver a bill or a overdue notice or those kinds of things. Have that stuff planned.
Yep.
Do you have someone that just likes being mean? Hey, give that to them. They'll go and yell at them,
Who's going to do your taxes at the end of the year? Are you doing them yourself? Great. Otherwise, if you're having someone else do it, put that in there.
And it can be cheap, but still something you should consider.
Yep. Office supplies. Yep. Other kind of office things generally, I guess, miscellaneous office costs. Let's see. How about your personal costs? How much it costs you to live? Your mortgage, your personal budget, your personal savings, your discretionary spending.
What if I have solar and I don't pay for energy? Should I still charge for energy?
Yeah. Well, you have to, right?
I should. Yes, absolutely.
I mean, there's no such thing as a free lunch.
Just because I'm not paying for it directly. Well, I did. I paid for the solar panels, right?
Exactly. Even if your solar is paid off, you paid for it and you're using it now.
Yep.
Yep. So that's included. How many hours per week do you work on your video production?
Yeah.
This helps you determine your hourly rate. How many vacation days? This is like this boils down to how much are you going to pay yourself as your own employee?
And you should consider that, because if you start surrounding yourself with people you have to pay, if you don't make sure there's a slice of the pie for you, when it gets to the end, you're going to have the change left in your hand. It's really easy to price yourself out of a project, haven't paid everybody else, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I guess I'm eating how this didn't do well.
Yes.
I think something that you have to really think about is non-billable hours.
Yes, exactly.
There's a lot of work that is really hard to justify any value for by people. So you just have to understand that there is a certain amount of non-billable hours that you're going to do. So figure out your rate, knowing that there's going to be 10 or 15% inefficiency with your time that you're going to be able to bill versus what you actually spend.
Yep. How about how much time you spend in client meetings? Like, a lot of times you don't actually charge for these meetings.
Yeah, but they're all prospecting, really, right?
Exactly. But there's no free lunch. Again, someone's paying for that time, and it's going to be the client indirectly. Yeah. Like, the meetings that you gave them for free is actually kind of woven into your hourly rate.
Yeah. And they're going to pay for those people that didn't hire you at all.
Yeah, exactly.
So you have to figure that out. What's your hit rate? If you're preparing for a new project and half of them don't end up signing up for using you, realize that someone's going to have to pay for that, and it's either you or someone else. And, the thing is business is not paying for it yourself. Yeah. That's not the idea of business.
So this gets into the costs of the specific project, but how much time are you going to spend writing the script?
That's a hard one, because, you could sit there, pound your head for a page for a day, or you could write, 30 pages. So how efficient are you? What other help do you need to make it that efficient? Those are really important things, because I'm not a fast writer, so it costs me in time more than other people. So would it make more sense to have somebody else write it? Well, in some cases, yes.
Yeah. How much time are you going to spend drawing storyboards or doing location scouting?
Or paying people to do that?
Yes, exactly. Planning your shoots, basically doing all the coordination. Even though these are non-billable, I mean, they might be billable, but all of this is sort of woven in again to your hourly rate.
They're necessary, regardless if you can put them as a line item.
Yes, exactly. How many days of production are you going to put into it? How many number of hours do you actually plan on working on those days? How many? Okay, if you buy your gear, how many years do you use that gear before you have to replace it?
Yeah, because you have to be paying yourself for that. So when you have to replace it, you just have the money to buy it. Yeah. Right? You don't want to just all of a sudden hope for, good tax return or something. Like, be planning your replacement schedule.
Yeah.
And that, around here I get to play with cameras all the time, all sorts of different ones. I'm always using something different, and that can get me really jaded to how life really is, and that it's unlikely and that you would replace your camera in like 2 versions. You're probably working on 2, just like your phone. Are you really going to replace it every time a new one comes out?
Yep.
Some people, yes, but I can't say that most would do that. That's definitely a unique position to be in.
Yep. How much is the gear that you own worth currently?
Yeah.
How much are you going to have to spend to rent gear that you don't already own?
Yeah, that's so much easier these days. It used to be, you had to know somebody that had the thing and you hoped it was available, blah, blah, blah. Now you can just go straight to, a website and order it and know it's going to show up and that it's at X amount of dollars the whole time. And you'll have support, which is also really helpful with rental equipment because it's not always, in perfect condition.
Yep. How much is it going to cost you to get yourself, your gear, and your crew to and from the location?
Yeah. Like even if it's just in the morning, right?
Yeah.
Like you go from one location to the next, you're just doing it. Okay. And that costs something.
Yep.
Had to have a vehicle to do it.
How much are you going to have to pay to feed your crew and cast? If you do have to feed them?
I say they starve. It's nothing better than a whole hangry crew that's just really angry and hungry.
Oh my gosh.
That's a really pleasant shoot to be on. Overfeed your help.
Yeah. Yeah. People, if they're well fed and well rested, they're generally happy. Just people in life. And
that's how Google and Apple, they get you. They have all the food they want, all the places to relax, and you know what it gets you to do? Never leave work because you're just comfortable. Oh yeah, I'll go play some basketball over here while you're still working.
Remember those Snickers commercials?
Oh yeah.
What was it? I don't remember what the slogan was, but they always say like, "You're not yourself when you're hungry."
Yeah. Those are still going.
Oh, I think,
you don't watch TVs. Yeah, I see them all the time.
Let's see. How much do you have to actually pay your crew? That's a pretty clear-cut one. How much do you have to pay actors? How much does it cost you to insure the production if you are insuring it? How much do all the props cost? And I would say in here also the consumables that are involved. So consumables, actually, they're not much of a consumable anymore, but the media, it used to be that tapes were kind of consumable.
Well, but like anything, your media card will only be written on so many times. So budgeting that, okay, if I'm charging for media, it's not so I can get a little bit fatter wallet on this project. It's so it goes into an account to pay for media when I need it.
Right. Let's see, costumes. How much do costumes cost? How much for your edit bay? How much does the hardware cost, and how much do you typically spend on the software? So these are per year costs.
And these can be really hard because, of course, you can build a $20,000-$40,000 computer, right? And they'd always be like, "Oh, it's going to be faster." What are you doing? What do your clients really want?
Right.
Do you really need your computer to be able to do 4K if no one's paying you for 4K? No. Are you doing it for your sanity or for expediation? Yes, those are great reasons, but make sure you know why you're spending more on something, because there's a lot of features. Well, like we were talking with beforehand with the R3, and it doesn't have a certain feature in video. It's only for photo. Well, you're paying for that feature regardless if you use it or not. So it's important to make sure that it's all covered.
This is definitely when doing this exercise of trying to figure out your cost, how much you're going to charge based on all of these costs, forces you to confront those types of questions.
Yeah.
Right. When you get down to the bottom and it says that you need to charge $1,700 an hour for a production, well, maybe you do, I guess. But if you're shooting weddings on the weekends, you're not doing $1,700 an hour just to shoot. And so it says, okay, well, where are things totally out of whack here? And maybe it's, partly I bought a $20,000 computer when a $5,000 computer would be fine.
Yeah. And that's your liability as a business owner, right? Is the more money you have invested and the less liquidity you have gives you less flexibility in times of need or want or what have you.
Yep. So let's see. Edit bay rental, if you happen to be renting that. Total amount paid to post-production staff. Hours spent in post-production, not just your hours, but everyone's hours. And then how much time are you going to take to assemble all the deliverables? Actually, we run into this. Well, maybe we don't so much anymore, but when you think about editing a video, don't just think about the editing portion, but all of the time that you're spending getting the export set up and rendering that out while it's rendering. If your computer's unavailable for other things, that's worth considering.
Yeah, and along with all this stuff is revisions, right?
Yeah.
So like, I could say I don't want revisions because I'm grumpy and I don't want changes.
Yep.
Sure. But really the biggest thing you should be frustrated about with revisions is it's costing you more time. So, realize that, you probably want a happy client. So just build in all the revisions you think they need into the cost of things. So you don't have to go, oh, well, if you really want that done, it's this much. Now, if they're being, asking for something that's not, really understandable, it's good to put a price on something. So they go, oh, no, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
But, you really want to pay attention to all of that spend. Well, I have to make a YouTube copy, Vimeo copy, and a blah, 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 whatever. Your computer's tied up, right? Maybe it is. I don't know. These days it's not as tied up, but it used to be making a DVD or whatever it was. It might be now uploading the video or making a different type of deliverable or another deliverable, or it might be the cost of or time to send the file across the server or whatever it is.
Yeah. So let's see. Only a couple things left, at least on our list, is the cost for the distribution costs. So actually, we have on here discs or other media, but actually, that part of this could be, if you pay for a service for large file transfer, that would go in here.
Yeah, or like just to host your videos. So Vimeo, if you put them there for, be able to share the videos, but as well to get comments or whatever from your client, well, that's something you should be aware of. Or if you play for a Frame.io, or something like that, that's supposed to be a, help communication tool. Is it really, are you really pricing that in?
Yeah. Yep. And then the last one is how much profit do you want to charge? Do you want to include? And this is usually done via a percentage. So with all of these things, you can kind of boil down what's the hourly rate. But that's your kind of break-even hourly rate if you just sort of total all these things up. If you do the math,
you should make something for the liability you're going through, right?
Yeah.
So
not only make something, like you should get your own pay.
Yeah.
You're paying yourself as an employee of your own business, but also the business itself should get a little bit more.
Yes.
So that you can reinvest. A quick Googling says aim for a typical margin is 25 to 30% profit margin.
Yeah, I usually put like 1,500. 2,000%.
Yeah.
I don't really like working.
Yeah, for sure. Actually, I have had friends actually who have done this where they, you kind of alluded to this, the idea that there's work that you really just don't want to do. So you just put an absurd price on it. And sometimes people bite.
Yeah. I remember the first time having to price out, it was a client that was up past Reading. So it's Reading's about 2-hour drive. And so what it ended up being is to be able to have a normal length shoot, I'd either need to pay overtime to my people, or we'd have to be up for the night. Or if it was long enough, we're going to have to be up for the night and we're still going to have to come back. And they were just used to the drive to the shoot, and then leave, go home. And so all of a sudden when it was 3 times as much, it's like, well, this isn't money I'm making. I'm gonna have to pay the hotel.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to pay the guys for being here. We have to have dinner while we're here. These are things that if we weren't here, we'd need to deal with it. So, and it was like, oh no, that's a no-go. Well, I guess we're not in the right location for you to be able to, hire someone more local so that, you don't have to worry about those things.
Yeah. So a lot of things to consider. There's actually, if you were to look at a budget for a major motion picture, it would be 100 times bigger than the list that we just outlined. But
although, and we didn't really hit on this, but this could be, what you're thinking about charging. This can also be what you're doing to help figure out what it's going to cost to fund your project, right? So if you're doing this as a documentary, doing all this kind of stuff, this isn't necessarily who you're going to charge your customer. This is what you're trying to fund to create the piece. And of course, then you have to figure out, okay, what their investments mean to the profit of the film, if there is such a thing or whatever, in that way. So you definitely, this can be for you just coming up with a budget or something to charge for your normal just video business, but this can scale all the way up to, having to find funding. And of course that's just a whole nother ball of worms, but it's all relational stuff.
Yeah. There's definitely, if you're trying to fund a major project, you're going to monetize it in an entirely different way.
Yes.
Right? And we've been talking about this from the perspective of you're doing some, lower level, small budget video production. But if you're making a documentary, you might be trying to sell it at the end. Or in the old days, you would try to sell DVDs or something. But you might sell it to a studio. You might license it to someone. So in that sense, you would do it a little bit different. You would total up the entire cost of the project. That would be your expenses. And then you'd have to try to estimate your revenues based off of however you plan on making money off of it. But the whole idea of trying to figure out the hourly cost or the hourly rate is not much of a thing there.
Yeah, not much help. But it is something that you're going to have to figure out, like what's the return on investment for whoever you're getting funding, right? No one's going to do an ROI of just one. It doesn't make any sense. So if it's one for one, I'll hold on to my money. Well, it's less risky to not spend my money. Yeah. So you have to, everybody's, for whatever risks people are putting out there, they should be paid accordingly.
The other thing that we didn't really talk about is contingencies. So a lot of times in a contract for video production, they have, this is how much it's going to cost, but they also have a clause in there for contingency of like, it could be as high as this much based on other things that happen. Mm-hmm. So for example, you have a weather delay, but some costs you can't recoup because of a weather delay because you book time at a certain place that's non-refundable, for example.
Yeah.
So a lot of times contracts will have that in there so that your client knows that, the price will probably be X, but there's a chance it could be X plus Y because of these things that can come up.
Yep. And the other part of this too is also like if you are doing, like, say, weddings, and someone wants to have you do, they just want the nicest things, and somehow someone told them about a red. So they're going, oh, I want a red camera. Okay, you're going to have to rent it. So you rent it and all that kind of stuff. And you go through the whole project. Well, if you have to rent it, are you putting your money up first, or are they putting a deposit down? So you want to make sure you pay attention to your liability on the project, because what happens if they didn't pay you anything up front and you get all the way through the project, so you did all of the work, and it comes to delivery and they're like, no, I'm not paying you. Yeah. Now you're completely out, whereas you want some leverage. You want them to pay the rest so they can have some value for what they gave you up front, but you don't want to be like, just, like if it's a $500 project, being like, I need $450 up front. Realize what costs are coming out of your pocket so you know what you're liable for during the project. So you shouldn't have to pay out of pocket for anything when you're doing those kinds of things. They should just be associated costs.
Yeah.
And you should just make sure you're not putting your butt out there too much.
Yeah.
Don't be funding someone else's project unless that's what you're intending to do.
Yeah. Generally, I would advise people who are just getting started to not extend credit to their clients. I mean, unless it's like a blood relative who you absolutely trust, I guess, maybe.
Yeah, and I would do, it's a non-refundable for all of the upfront costs is what I would usually put in that. And, of course, that would be after a certain point when costs start to be accrued. Yeah. So it might be, 15 days before, it really depends on what liabilities you've set up. If you have a rental coming and you can't cancel it or whatever, you need to make sure all those things are associated. Now, it can be all really, really complicated, all this kind of stuff, or you can just say what you think it could cost and hope for the best, but you're not going to be able to do that very often until you're not doing it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. So all this is to say, it's very complicated, unfortunately. It's like a very simple question, right? Like people will ask, well, how much shooting a wedding this weekend. How much should I charge for it? Ooh, boy, that was a big question. It took you a short amount of time to ask it, but there's a lot that goes into it.
So, I had a wedding that they asked for like the whole story. They wanted like what's the dress show that they had anyway, interviews with all the people that are there, and they wanted like a 30-minute deliverable at the end. Like, what's your budget? We have like $600. I'm like, yeah, I don't like, maybe we should not talk anymore.
We're not
it's like, we're like so far off. Well, and then usually you're like, well, that's like a $30,000 or 60, whatever it was, production. They go, oh, and then, but it's good. Sometimes you're educating people. And they go, oh, well then, what can we get for $600? And then it might be the reverse. Then you're just going, okay, well then what's $600 get someone?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot that goes into, there's so many variables for every project.
Yeah. And the thing is this rate calculator has a lot of things in it, but what it does is it makes you have those answers. right? So how much did you pay for your computer? What is the gear that you have? Maybe that means you're going to put their serial number down, right? So these are just good business practices. They're also really great for when someone wants to invest in you. You have the answers already.
Yeah.
What are your liabilities as far as rent goes? Those are easy. If you have the answers right now, that's what good businessmen have. I mean, that's what people that know what they're doing, they have answers when they're asked. It's not like you can't be like, I don't have the answer yet. That's fine. But this will force you to have the answers that are sometimes hard to come up with in the middle of everything.
Yeah. So these are good exercises to go through, before you have to, come up with this number on the fly. Just do this while you're in between work or something like that.
It's fun to dream. This is the kind of stuff I remember doing when I first started wanting to do weddings. And I remember thinking, man, if I get paid $1,000 for a wedding, that'd be so amazing.
Yeah.
And then I got paid $1,000 and I was like, it wasn't really quite worth it.
Yeah. Well, I think what happens is people who just start out, they're having so much fun the first time that it's not like work, but kind of becomes work.
Then it becomes like, what's really hard, or what kind of work do you not like doing? It's like, the majority of this project's that.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'll pass.
Okay, so that probably covers the topic. Check it out, videomaker.com/rates. That's rates with an S at the end. Again, this is good to get started, but you probably should get into a spreadsheet at some point if you really want to take the next step. And maybe we'll do that, make a spreadsheet template in the future, but for now it's not there, unfortunately. Yeah. Okay, thanks for everyone for tuning in. We'll catch you next time. Big thanks to everyone for listening. Hope you got something out of that. If you missed that URL, it's down in the description for our video rate calculator. So as always, if you've been listening to the podcast and you enjoy it, we'd love it if you went to iTunes and give us a written 5-star review. It is super, super helpful for the podcast. It helps people find it on the most popular podcast platform in the world. So it's a big, big help. As always, I want to thank Chris Monlux and everyone here at Videomaker. And I've been Mike Wilhelm, and you've been listening to the Videomaker podcast.